the last little while, I've been using this, the 2019 base model 13-inch MacBook Pro. Today, I'm going to tell you why this is the best value current gen MacBook product. As I mentioned, this is the base model 13-inch MacBook Pro. I have upgraded nothing, not the RAM, not the CPU, not the storage. I'll just throw out the hardware specs of the machine here, so there aren't any questions later. This machine as configured runs $1,300 US or $1,700 where I live in Canada. It's not as good a value for me as my American counterparts, but with the education discount I saved $130. Not bad. So then, for all that cash, what kind of hardware do you get, especially versus last gen? This is a question many might be asking because the last generation of MacBook Pros used the same 8th generation Intel CPUs, and since they are now out of date, they can often be had for a little less from third parties, refurbished or otherwise. When it comes specifically to the base model, there are two main differences between the 2018 and 2019 MacBook Pros. The 2019 model adds the Touch Bar and a 1.4 GHz quad-core Intel Core i5 CPU. Now the Touch Bar doesn't make everybody excited, and that's understandable. Depending on what apps you use, it can be a serious time saver or a useless secondary display that needlessly drains your battery. Since I'm a Final Cut Pro user, it does have some decent functionality for me, but I can completely understand that it seems like a gimmick to others. Important to note that the Touch Bar also does include a Touch ID sensor, which is actually a very good feature. However, that quad-core CPU I mentioned has some serious implications for everybody buying this machine. Previously, the base model 13-inch MacBook Pros were limited to 2 cores, and that had been the case since the launch of the controversial 2016 MacBook Pro. Before 2019, I would have had to spend an eye-watering 2,200 Canadian dollars to get 4 cores on a 13-inch model. But now that Apple has upped the core count on these machines, even the base model of the MacBook Pro can get some serious work done. I personally use my machine to video edit on the go, something I wasn't able to do previously. This is huge because I can run any of the Apple Pro Suite apps whenever and wherever I want to, and have a good experience while doing so. The 4 CPU cores are great for any tasks that aren't just limited to web browsing. Whether you're photo editing, programming, music making, or video editing like me, you and your wallet will greatly benefit from having more power in this base model machine. Now that I've talked about differences, let's see what hasn't changed. The display on these MacBook Pro machines is excellent. The 13.3-inch IPS 2560 by 1600 display is perfect for any sort of graphical work, and the support of the wide P3 color gamut ensures that even professionals can get serious color work done on this display. 500 nits of brightness ensures that you can always see what you're working on, and even though I don't use it, the True Tone feature can help ease your eyes depending on what environment you're in. Also a running standout is the trackpad. Even on the 13-inch model, the trackpad is massive. Even though the built-in macOS gestures can use 3 or 4 fingers, there is plenty of room to execute any on-screen movements you need to make. Tracking is smooth and precise, and the flat glass surface allows for this. Another thing that has been first class for many years now with Apple laptops is build quality. These laptops are machined from solid aluminum and are built like tanks. Honestly, the most damage you will probably be able to do to it is a few scuffs and scratches, which is why I picked up a D-brand skin for mine. Now, there are some inherent risks and limitations with buying this particular model of MacBook Pro, not the least of which is the keyboard. All of the MacBooks that use Apple's butterfly keyboard design are at risk of failure because of dust and other particles making their way under the keycaps and causing sticking and unresponsiveness. This model is on the Apple Keyboard Replacement Program list, but that won't last forever. I haven't had any issues with my machine, but I've only had it for a short period of time. Not everyone is affected by this issue, so by keeping your laptop clean and not using it in a wood shop, for example, you should be able to avoid or mitigate the effects. If I have any issues with mine in the future, I'll come back to this video and leave a pinned comment down below detailing any keyboard issues that might have arisen. The other main limitation here is the type and number of ports. This model only has 2 USB-C Thunderbolt 3 ports, while the higher end models have 4. This especially becomes a problem when you need to charge. The situation is even more amplified for me because I use 2 external drives when I'm editing. One stores my footage, and the other stores my Final Cut Pro libraries. Luckily, I found this great dongle on Amazon that I'll link below. It lets me connect another display over HDMI or VGA, as well as using a USB accessory and charging. Then I can use a simple USB-C to USB-A adapter to connect my second external drive. It's a bit jank at the best of times, and there are more than a couple of cables involved, but having Thunderbolt 3 is great for future expansion, such as an eGPU or Thunderbolt storage dock, so I'm more than happy to put up with the different connectors. So then, should you buy this machine, and should you spend some extra money on upgrades? Should you wait for next year when there's supposedly going to be a big design refresh? Here's the breakdown. This machine is the base model, as I mentioned, and it still has a quad-core CPU. Back when this design generation first launched in 2016, the base models were limited to dual-core CPUs, and knowing Apple, something similar could happen next year, even though it is unlikely. I think the main reason to avoid waiting for next year is that having this amount of performance will be initially more expensive since Apple has to cover their R&D costs. So you will need to wait even longer to get comparable performance at a comparable price to this year's model. Therefore, I recommend buying now, with now referring to late 2019 and early 2020. So if you decide to pull the trigger, what upgrades, if any, should you make? There are two I would recommend if you have the budget: the RAM and the storage. If you do intense work such as video editing, I would say upgrade the RAM to 16 gigabytes, since you're probably using an external hard drive or SSD for storage already. If you use a variety of different programs and have lots of loose or miscellaneous files, I would say upgrade the storage to 256 gigabytes. Other than those two, I wouldn't bother splurging on anything else. This base model 13-inch MacBook Pro is some of the best value Apple has offered in a laptop in recent memory, and I hope you enjoyed my review. Make sure you subscribe for more tech videos like this.